Welcome to the Being Known podcast with my friend, Dr. Curt Thompson.
And my very good friend, Sweeney.
Where we discover and explore what it means to be truly known. Hello, Curt.
Hey, Pep.
Time has come today. Chambers Brothers, obscure reference, but you remember it? Cuckoo, cuckoo. You remember? I can't sing it because we can't pay the rights for it, but
if I sang it, I'm sure that they wouldn't worry about needing to get the rights paid for.
Me neither.
They wouldn't be worried about that.
So
say the reference again.
The Chambers Brothers.
Yeah.
Probably the 70s song called Time Has Come Today.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know it, but I'll check it out.
And the reason why I bring it up is because today we are going to be delving into the temporal domain of integration. And it has a lot to do with time.
It does. It does, indeed. So I want to start by just saying this, that we're going to talk about a topic today, the notion of how we humans live with this notion of time and what impact it has on our mind and why it's important for us to pay attention to. But just to give an example, I think about how 6 months ago, this podcast wasn't yet really officially a thing. And now it is. And I go back in my mind to even a year ago or more when we were first really seriously talking about, getting on this horse and riding it. And I think about how even remembering the progression of that time span from the time we first started to talk about it seriously to then starting to produce it, and allowing my mind to go back and reflect on that just gives me such joy. Not only do I continue to have joy in what we're doing right now, and what we're doing right now today with this recording and having you all join us, but the idea that I can go back in my mind, that we can go back in our minds and imagine and think about those early conversations and think about comparing where we've come from where those early conversations are now. And to be able to, what gratitude wells up in my heart for you and Amy, for the way God has woven this together. And the fact that I have joy and gratitude has everything to do with the fact that I can go back and course over the period of time in a way that, as far as we know, squirrels don't do. As far as we know. Now, like we say, we don't know that they don't because they're not telling us, but it's possible. But it is the case, it seems, that we humans really seem to be the only creatures that we know of who have this sense of time in the way that we do. And we might, you all might be wondering, well, what does time have to do with the mind? How does time have anything to do with when we talk about the mind? And I want to juxtapose two things. I want to juxtapose. The first thing I want to say is I want to appeal to a verse from the Bible, from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And it's in the 11th verse. And the verse says this: He, God, He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. It's one of these, kind of bedrock texts in the biblical narrative, in which the writer, Solomon in this case, we believe, was acknowledging that human beings have eternity placed in our heart. And it's not just something that happen to be there, but it has been placed on purpose by God in our hearts. This sense that we have an awareness that we've come from someplace and that we are going someplace, and that this is different from any other creature on the planet. That when you study, zoology, you get the sense that animals do have an awareness of memory. They do have an awareness of, like, I put the food in that place. They do demonstrate some sense of anticipating a future. But we don't have any clear evidence that would indicate that they have the awareness, that they're aware of the passage of time. We don't have the sense that animals are aware that they were born and are aware that they're going to die.
Right. I don't have proof of it, but my small case study is that if I step out of my house for 2 minutes and I step back in, my dog acts as though I've been gone for a month. The dog has the memory of me, but has no idea that I've literally only been gone for 5 minutes. I mean, she's jumping up and so excited. And if I leave the house for the whole day, I come back, it's the exact same reaction.
Well, when we were doing seasons, Pepper, you would leave the room and you'd come back, and we'd all have the same. We'd all have the same reaction. And so
Right.
I'm not
So
sure
it's not really a blind case study when
I'm not sure it's really about your dog. I think that's a lot more about you, because when you've been gone for 5 minutes, and you come back to the room, I'm like, I just want to stand up and hug you and just so glad you're back.
Yeah. You and my wife both.
So it is this strange thing. So we can say, like, yeah, we have a sense of the past and the future. What's interesting in child development is that, so you mentioned your dog.
Right.
Children don't develop the awareness of a past and a future until, in the way that we as adults have it, until they're probably, somewhere between the ages of about 3 and 6 years of age. A sense that there is a past, and that sense of yesterday is different in my felt sense of imagination than my sense of last week or last year. When I'm 4 or 5 years old, I might not have that ability yet. It's not until I become older as a child that I begin to develop this sense. And so we see how even my concept of, and my awareness of time, my awareness that I was born at a time that was so many years ago and that I'm going to die sometime in the future, is a function of brain development as well. And so if this isn't just some abstract magical thing that gets inserted into us, and we have it from the time that we're on the planet, there is a developmental aspect of this. And so we are a people that have a sense of the past, that we have a sense of birth. And the main thing is that we also have an awareness that we are not going to be on the planet forever. Like, nobody gets out alive. Most of us, when we're younger, provided that we don't have any significant chronic medical illnesses, or that we don't have a lot of challenges in our lives physically, we have a harder time conceptualizing or thinking, like, I'm aware that I'm going to die at some point in the future, but I don't really think about it that much. Like, I know it as a fact, but it doesn't really have much of an impact. I'll remember, I'm 58 now. I remember when I turned 50. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't feel nearly as old as I imagined 50-year-olds to be when I was 35.
Right.
I don't feel that, like, physically I felt good. I didn't have the sense that I was, like, nearly as, ready with one foot in the grave as I imagined 50-year-olds to be when I was much younger. So I was really kind of surprised, like, wow, I'm not nearly as old as I thought I was, or that I would be. And at the same time, I also had this very clear sense of, almost suddenly, in the course of that 50th, 49th, 50th, 51st year, being aware that I don't have much time left. It's like I crossed some threshold and I became much more acutely aware, the felt sense of the limit of my time here on Earth. And I felt the uptick in anxiety. Mostly not just like worried I'm going to die, but like the uptick of, like, oh my gosh, there's so much life to live and I don't have time, right? It's like Gandalf, right? In Lord of the Rings, where he says, 300 lives of men have I lived, and now I have no time.
Right.
I've been here for all this time, and now I've gotten to the end. I have no time.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we see about our awareness of time is that it creates a source of anxiety for us. Because I'm aware of the future, because I'm aware of the reality that I have a limit to how much time I have, I become anxious about this. One author in his writing suggests that all of culture, everything that we do, everything from the Tower of Babel to Google and Apple and our next big thing, all of culture is an attempt to cope with the reality that we're all going to die. That it is our attempt to put our stamp of eternity on the world. I have to admit, I myself have this longing. The older I'm getting, the longing to kind of like hang on, the longing to want to make sure that my life matters, that it counts. Almost this sense of like, I want to know that I'm going to live on, that people are going to keep talking about me forever and ever and ever, right? I mean, I know they'll talk about you, but like I'm worried that they're, that as soon as they have the lunch after my funeral, the lunch is going to be like a big party to say, hey, let's go see the Nats play.
Never.
Who's got tickets? And this sense then that we are anxious about things. And so I said we wanted to juxtapose two things. I had that one verse that God has put eternity, but in that verse, it also reminds us that no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. There is this reality that I can picture that the world has come from a place and it's going forward to a place, and that God is in charge of all that. And I am not God. I don't get to be in charge of all of it like I would like to be. I don't get to be able to extend myself into the future. And we could talk forever and day about how we with modern science are actually trying to do that, how we're trying to, through all kinds of, human genome expressions and experiences are trying to like copy ourselves and make ourselves eternal. Not unlike what the people of the Tower of Babel were trying to do. Like, we're going to plant ourselves here on the plane and we will not be moved. We will not ever be dissolved. We will not ever be disintegrated. Like we will be God in that sense. And I'm aware of that part of me that wants to be God and wants to do that. And so the other thing, of course, we would want to juxtapose scripture with another beautiful piece of artwork, which is the Steve Miller Band's Fly Like an Eagle.
Yeah.
From 1975, I think it was. And this sense of time keeps on slipping into the future. This sense that I'm aware of this. And then he wants to fly like an eagle. He wants to be away from this body. In other verses in the song, he lists a number of things about the world that are the world gone wrong. People who are without food, people without shelter, people who are without family. This sense of suffering, this sense of agony, and time just keeps slipping. And I just want to escape from this. There is this sense in which I want to escape from this. And I'm tempted to want to do this. I'm tempted to want to escape from the reality and my awareness that time keeps slipping into the future. There's all these things about my life and about the world around me that is not okay. And I can't do anything about it. Absolutely. Because turns out only God gets to be in charge of all those things. I just want to slip away. And hence I've got all my addictions. I've got all the things that I do that help me, try to slip away, to go into some other place and some other time. One of the things, Pepper, that we talk about that is true about what the brain does with time and our suffering, and why is it that time plays such a significant role in the function of the mind, has a lot to do with what I tell people that is true about when they come into my office. I said, most people who are in my office, one thing that is true about them, it's not the only thing, but one thing that is true about much of our suffering is because we live at some place and in another time than where we actually are. which is the present moment. But so much of my mind's attention is spent directed at either the regret of the past, the sadness of the past, the disappointment of the past, the shame of the past, the brutality and trauma of the past. Or I spend it anticipating the anxiety of the future. Now, this past or future where I direct my attention can be the future that is waiting for me 5 minutes from now when I have to have the conversation with my wife that I'm afraid to have. Or it can have to do with, I was late to that appointment and, there were 4 people waiting for me and it backed everything up by 15 minutes. And I felt so bad. And I still feel really bad about that because I'm thinking about that. It just happened, 30 minutes ago. And of course, there are different ways. We're going to talk about the 2 different kinds of ways that the human mind can play with the past and the future. But most of our time, much of my time is spent either regretting because I'm wandering around in the past somewhere. And a lot of my wandering, I'm doing it and I don't even know that I'm doing it. It's not like I wake up in the morning and say, like, from 10 to 11 this morning, I'm just going to think about that year 10 years ago that was so bad. And I'm just going to think about that. No, I don't do that. We find ourselves by hook or by crook, quite accidentally, but non-consciously. So we're not we're not doing it with a lot of awareness, but we still do it willfully. We wander into parts of our past that are wounded. We wander into parts of our past that are the results of those wounds.
Right. I mean, even if we're not spending time thinking specifically about those times, we're carrying those wounds and those feelings into our present and into our future.
And the more I tend to think in the past in those terms and in those conditions, that then tends to do the second thing that I do, right? It's a regret of that, or it's the anxiety of the future. And anxiety doesn't just show up as just worry. It can also show up as anticipated sadness, anticipated disappointment, anticipated shame. I see the future and all I sense is shame. I see the future and all I sense is fear. And particularly around certain relational dynamics, relational interactions, you all might be thinking about this about your friendships or your relationship with your parents or with your kids or in your marriages. You might be thinking about it in your business prospects, the people that you're working with, your employees or employers. We imagine, well, how much longer do I have to be in this job? I'm going to be in this job forever. Because we think so much into the future without paying attention to the fact that that's what we're doing. And often the role of shame is hard at work in both of these domains. And so this is part of the challenge. And the other part of the challenge is just that my awareness, my brokenness and the way that I see the world in general is a reminder to me of what the writer of Ecclesiastes says, which is that only God gets to occupy all of eternity. God has placed eternity in my heart. I'm aware of time, but I don't rule time. And this is also anxiety provoking for me in my current state of mind because I have such a hard time just resting and trusting in God, just exhaling in the present moment. Instead, I end up regretting about the past and worrying about the future. And I can't get my mind out to the edges of it so that I know that I can manage all that stuff. I'm going to go to my grave with certain relationships still unhealed because of the things that I still regret from the past. I mentioned earlier that there are 2 separate ways that the brain tends to consider and to respond to the temporal domain of the mind. One is the more passive way that we've been talking about. Like I said, most of us don't put on our to-do list for tomorrow, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to plan, I'm going to regret 2 weeks ago. That's what I'm going to do from 8 to 9. And then from 2 to 3, I'm going to worry about the future. Like, we don't plan to do that. It happens quite passively. It happens kind of automatically.
Right.
We find ourselves in these places kind of like wandering in my imagination, in my daydreaming in these places, but it tends to fill my life. But that's different than a different way. There's a second way that we actually have a posture toward in a relationship with time, and that is a more active, intentional, explicit use of the dorsolateral, the right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the part of me that is my planning brain. And so there are times when we can think about the past. I'm going to reflect on the past. If you are in a counseling session and your therapist asks you, or if your pastor asks you, or your friend asks, your husband, your wife asks you, tell me about your day. I'm actually going to reflect with intention. With intention, I'm going to reflect on this, but I'm doing so for the purpose of acquiring wisdom. I'm not doing so because my mind is just kind of like hijacking me and taking me down some path of regret where shame is waiting. No, this is an activity that is intended to bring me to healing and integration. You all may have done this. I do this. Pepper, I think you've done this when we journal, right? When we write. Mm-hmm. When we write, we are reflecting on our past because we are anticipating the Spirit of God is going to be in that writing process and revealing things to us. And so I want to listen to particular pieces of music, not just to be nostalgic, but because I want to reflect. I want to go back in my day and create a gratitude journal. I want to go back and think, what am I grateful for? Because I want to pull that gratitude on purpose with intention into my present moment and have it shape my mind. And the fact that I can go back to this morning when my wife prayed for me because something difficult this day was coming forward, I go back to that and I sit with that. And we pay attention to it in order for it to come, but we're bringing it forward in order for it to shape who we are. I am reflecting on the past. I'm not regretting the past. I'm reflecting on the past. And the same way when the future comes, we talk about my planning brain. Again, I don't plan to worry, but I do plan other things that I want to have be purposeful. So I'm going to plan for these 2 hours that we're spending today recording. I'm going to plan to write that note to my wife or to my friend. I'm going to plan to do things. And here's the beautiful thing about planning. It is with intention. And when we are doing this with intention, all of that, both reflecting and planning, is an activity that I'm doing in the present moment, even though it has to do with either the past or the future. The activity itself that the brain is engaged in is not taking place in the past or the future. It's taking place right now, in the only time I ever have, the present moment. I don't know that I'm, we were talking about earlier, like I'm at the age where my father had his first heart attack. Mm. And so I think about that. But I don't think about it. I often find myself wandering into that territory, not reflecting for the purpose of moving it forward. I often find myself being taken there, and then I worry. And I will say, I'm at a time in my life when there's probably not a day goes by. My father died of heart disease. His father died of heart disease. I had a brother who had heart disease. I'm like, I wonder if today's the day. Now, I don't mean to sound all macabre with you all listening to this. I mean, and as you mentioned earlier, we're hoping that it doesn't really happen before this podcast is over.
Yeah, just hold off until we're done recording today. I don't want to have to try to edit and mock your voice and put words in your mouth so that just don't make it difficult on me.
Well, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard because I feel like I'm just channeling you all the time anyway. I feel like, I mean, look, let's just be honest.
Uh-huh.
The only reason I'm on this podcast is so that, your thoughts are too big. Your thoughts are so big.
My thoughts are big indeed. I speaking of big thoughts, a lot of what you're talking about reminds me of, it's a line from a poem from the 18th century. And I don't know who the poet was, or I don't know the rest of the poem, but this line, our births are nothing but our death begun, as tapers waste the moment they set fire.
Wow.
you know? I mean, um,
Wait. Could you say that again? Say it again.
our births are
Mhm.
nothing but our deaths begun as tapers waste the moment they set fire. Could be take fire, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's I hope you all push pause, rewind, play it again, play it again, play it again. Because in many respects, what you just quoted is kind of the undercurrent that we are all attempting to live with. Like, even though we're flittering about,
mm,
really working hard to, you know, keep the train of death from chasing us down,
right.
which is represented by that quote that you just offered to us. We're doing all these things to pretend that we're not going to die.
Yeah.
Now, here's the really good news about the gospel. And interestingly enough, like we said, that our ability to even perceive time is a brain development thing. I can't do at age 2 what I can do at age 22 in terms of time. I can't imagine time in the same way. And here's one of the beautiful things about the brain. From the brain standpoint, there actually is no such thing as the past or the future. Now, here's what I mean by that. I don't mean that we don't have a past, that we don't have a story. But I mean that from the brain's perspective, even when I'm thinking about the past or imagining the future, all of that activity that gives me the sense that I am sitting 2 weeks ago on a dock on a lake in New York, or whatever it is that I'm thinking about, all of that is taking place right now in the present moment. And the really good news about this is that because everything's taking place in the present moment, it means that the healing of our trauma that has happened in the past and that continues to take place in the future in our imagination is open. The healing of our trauma, that door is open because we can come into the present moment and be present with the brain that remembers our trauma to be a certain thing. We often, one of the things, Pepper, that people come into my office and say is, well, that happened in the past. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't go back and rewrite history. And because of that, that future is set. Because I can't change the past, I have very little capacity to alter the future.
Right.
To which we want to say, because it's God who has placed eternity in your heart, it's also God who in Jesus on Good Friday and in the years preceding that comes to heal not only who we are right now, but he comes to heal everything in every time frame that ever was and that ever will be. We talk about time, and one of the ways that we actually navigate it as human beings, one of the ways that we actually engage it, we've talked about attachment in our episode on the domain of the narrative domain of the mind, the way that we tell stories. And so our attachment and our developing narrative and the way we tell stories, not least about ourselves, is so important as the mechanism that helps us navigate time. Because if somebody would say, like, well, tell us your story. You would tell us your story about your past. And if we were to say, well, tell us where you are now, and then tell us where you anticipate you'll be in 3 weeks, in 6 months, in 10 years, we're all doing that in light of our attachment patterns. We're all doing that in light of the experiences that we have. And so it's not just as if it's us and time. My way of engaging time has everything to do with my storytelling mechanism. That is the way that I engage this phenomenon. That is what drives and determines what I do with my past and my future, how I either spend more time in regret or anxiety, or if I spend more time reflecting or planning in the present moment relative to the story that I've lived in. And the beautiful thing about what we've been learning so far about all these different domains is that when it comes to our experience of time and all of the beauty that it can give us, because as we said at the beginning, like even right now, I'm thinking about oh my goodness, I can't even remember what episode it was, but you sent Amy and me the pictures. I would want to get this up on our YouTube channel. I don't know if we can do that. Sent us the pictures of the robin. Was it the robin? It was nesting outside your window. The nest and the whole architectural development of a family.
Yeah.
Building the nest, laying the eggs, nesting the eggs, giving birth, the whole shooting match. It's a temporal thing, right? You watch it from beginning to end. And I'm even sitting here now thinking, oh, that just brings such joy to me because I'm going back and reflecting on that. And this is what Good Friday and resurrection does for us. When Jesus shows up behind locked doors in John 20, he's indicating to the disciples that I don't just move through walls, I move through time and space. I cover everything. And so into both their regret, you can imagine these people in this room thinking about their past, regretting it, saddened by it, anxious, terrified of their futures. And Jesus shows up into this present moment and says, peace be with you. And he's not just saying peace be with you right now, because you're probably a little overwhelmed with the fact that here I am. But it's peace be to you and the sexual abuse that happened to you when you were 10. Peace be to you in your marriage that you are really convinced is not going to make it. That Jesus was there to say to them, I'm here to redeem every single moment of time. Not just what has happened in the past, but I'm going to be in every single moment of your future. What I want you to do is pay attention to me. What I want you to do is abide in me, such that when you imagine your future, you imagine me being in it. You know, in The Shack, that lovely little book, the protagonist is having a conversation with Jesus on the dock, I think, and Jesus says to him, you know, Mac, one of the problems with you humans is that when you imagine your futures, you don't imagine me being in it. And I think of all the times when I am out in my future worrying, and Jesus isn't within a country mile of me. You know, we have this really odd, for us modernists, we have this really odd passage of scripture in 1 Peter chapter 3, where Peter talks about Jesus preaching to the dead at the time of his crucifixion, that his death was not apparently inactive. I'm not sure what plans God has for me when I'm dead, like where I'm going to be going. Maybe come in and visit you. We'll have a scotch together. That'll be weird, but it'll be a beautiful thing.
I figure that when you're dead, you can't drink your share of the scotch anyway. So,
no, dude, no, you don't get it. Like when I'm dead, like there will be no end to how much scotch we can drink. And there won't be any intoxication. We're just going to enjoy the scotch. That's all we're going to do, because it's all going to be.
John Prine has this song he put out on his last album, and he talks about when I get to heaven. He says, I'm going to have a cocktail, vodka and ginger ale, and I'm going to smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long.
Okay, so this is John Prine planning
Yeah.
for the future,
Yeah.
right? But this is the thing. Like, we each have parts of us that feel dead, that took place someplace in the past, right? And like, Peter isn't messing around when he writes about this, right? He cites Noah. He cites like a long way back. He doesn't just go back to David. He doesn't just go back to Moses. He goes back to Noah, almost like before time,
Right.
to say Jesus is covering all of this, that all of life is to be redeemed. And, I have these two remaining thoughts. One is this notion of what's coming to mind is the Pietà, right? Michelangelo's 6,700-pound marble sculpture of Mary and Jesus at St. Peter's Basilica, and the mother is holding her son. And what is so stunning is that the only reason we have this sculpture is because we get to see it through the lens of Easter. But because of Easter, we actually look back on time and we look at Good Friday. We look at that suffering, that affliction for which we don't have words. We look at that mother and her boy, and it speaks to our weeping. It speaks to our own trauma, our own shame, our own powerlessness. But it does so because it tells the story that Jesus has preached to every single moment we've ever lived. That evil is desperately trying to devour. And he says, peace be to you. Peace be to you. And this reminds me, that it brings me back to this section of Ecclesiastes that we started with, this notion of God has set eternity in the human heart, because what's so interesting are the verses that surround it. Those verses say this: what do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. And this, just those things, yeah, like we look around right now, we're coming out of pandemic, but we're entering into there are so many things that where the rancor and the war and the incivility remains. And we look at all our toil and we see the burden that we carry as a race, as individuals. And then we read these words: He has made everything beautiful in its time. And you look around and it's like, it's not hard for us to look around and see, like, I got lots of places where I ain't seeing any beauty at all. I'm seeing just the opposite. And this scripture does not suggest that war is a beautiful thing. This scripture does not suggest that crucifixion is a beautiful thing in and of itself. It does not suggest that sexual abuse and drug addiction and all the things are beautiful in and of themselves. But it is saying that even in those spaces, over time, God will take all of it and make it beautiful. Everything over time. And everything has its time. And, I so often, Pepper, worry that my life, isn't going to be relevant, isn't relevant. Because, right, I walk around with that undercurrent that I'm like forgettable. And so I'm working really, really hard so that, I can live forever. So I want to be famous and all these things that, because I'm so desperately aware of how forgettable I sometimes feel, this part of me, not all of me, but this part of me.
Yeah.
And what God is saying is like, no, Curt, in your time, like you are being made beautiful in the time that you live on the earth. You're not being made beautiful for like, the 22nd century, but that's okay. But the reason that I worry that I'm not going to be beautiful is because I haven't waited to listen to Jesus say to me, peace be with you right now. And also in all those parts of you in your past that have led you to believe that you are not somehow an object of beauty. And so, I say this to you. And we often say it with great delight and fun. But like, you're a beautiful man. And I want you to take it in. And I want to take it in. And I want you all who are hearing this to know that you are a beautiful woman. You are a beautiful man. And that time is what God is using to persuade us that it's true. And this notion that he's put eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. And he's saying, I want you not to worry about that. I want you to live in the space, in the time that you occupy. The writer goes on to say, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and do good while they live. While they live, while we are here in the present moment, in the present moment, reflecting on my past and planning for my future, but not regretting my past or worrying about my future. That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. In this world, you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, because I have time in my box, Jesus says. Not exactly in those words.
Right.
I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. God does it to have this notion of fearing God at this time when Solomon would be writing. This notion of fearing God is to have this sense of awe, this sense of reverence, this sense of connection. But God also, we see hints of this throughout the Old Testament, that when God's writing even through the prophets, that when he says, and you will fear my name, it's this sense of like, you will have relationship with me. You will know me, like you will fear the Lord. This sense that like you will have, this is not like you will be afraid of me, but you will know that I am your father and you are my son and my daughter, and nothing gets between you and me, not death and not time. I simply want you to live in the time that you have in the present moment, reflecting on your past, so that I may be with you in those moments to heal them through whatever way we're going to go about doing that, through its psychotherapy, through its healing prayer, through its journaling, through its encounter with art, encounter with great music, great friendships. And I want you now to plan for your future with the humility of knowing that as you plan, I take delight in it. And if you get to that future, beautiful. And if you don't, fine, because I've got your time span all wrapped up. And at the end of the day, quite literally, I have a place prepared for you. And when we're ready, I'm going to come and get you and have you be with me, because I really want you to be with me and I want to be with you for all time. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Curt, this was beautiful today. Timely for me. There's, I'm similar to you with the passing of my father this year. That generation of my aunts and uncles and everybody, it really has me thinking about time. And I want to be someone who reflects and doesn't regret, who plans and doesn't worry. I want to put in more practices of journaling and prayer and reflecting on pieces of music and spending more time with friends, those things that help.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. This was great. Once again,
Always, man.
knocked it out of the park.
Always great to be with you, brother. I just, man, somehow either you and Amy got to move to DC or we got to move to Cincinnati or something.
Come on. The weather's fine. Cicadas are coming.
Hey, I mean, they could have told this story about time every 17 years, bro.
Yeah, they
Like,
do tell a story about time, right?
that's right.
And
Yeah.
I regret that they're coming.
Oh my gosh. Hey, that's just so great. I just noticed, we mentioned either come to DC or to Cincinnati, and Amy just piped in and said like, or Santa Monica.
Yeah.
But I'm actually looking for a change of seasons, right? I'm not, I suppose Santa Monica is okay.
Yeah. You just
like I have no sense of the passage of time, except when the fires come. I suppose when the fires come, I would know.
Santa Monica is actually lovely. It's just if you have to ever get out of it, it's not so fun. I mean, it's just if you can live in
Hotel
that bubble,
California.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, Amy, I'm kidding. We're kidding, sort of. I would love to live in Santa Monica, but only if you make sure that you don't move from there.
Right. Right.
That's right.
Well, we have to end this thing, Curt.
All right, man.
Yep. Thank you so much.
All good.
Yeah.
Thank
appreciate you.
Love you, bro.
Love you.
Till next time.
Yep.
One of the things that stood out was, what do you anticipate? Oh, this is my take on it, but what do you anticipate or feel or think when you reflect on the past and the future? And I thought, what do we do if we don't have the assurance of peace be with you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I get stuck if I don't remember and recall and bring that in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was having a conversation with our clinical director, Courtney, a couple of weeks ago, and we had a case that was challenging for me, and I just wasn't feeling the way the case was going. I was feeling kind of pretty incompetent. I wasn't feeling very good about my skills. I wasn't feeling very good about whether or not I was being helpful for this patient. And of course, there's always things that you can correct, always things that you can, you can reflect on, well, what have we done? And how do we want to plan to, take next steps? But of course, that's not where my mind was going. My mind goes to places like, I suck at this, right? And I just remember her looking at me. I'll never forget the look on her face and the tone of her voice, the whole like nonverbal, like just coming to find me in that moment. And it felt like the part of me that was feeling bad felt like, the 7-year-old. It feels like he's in trouble, not with her and not with the patient, but just like in trouble somehow, like I'm in trouble, like I've done something wrong. And I felt like so deeply loved in that moment when she was just talking about like what it means for drawing my attention to other things that are true about who I am as a clinician. But mostly I was very deeply aware of feeling mothered, very deeply aware of feeling cared for, like the part of me that isn't 58, that is more like he's 8. And like, it's one of those things where the present moment of healing, in that moment of connection with her, like I'm being reminded. So your point, Amy, about like, I've got to remember certain things. Like I do. And the way that and sometimes like even my trying to remember on my own isn't enough.
Right.
It's my being remembered by the presence of someone speaking to me in a certain tone of voice, speaking certain words, of course, but it's her presence and you know, I mean, and the two of you have been this to me countless times on multiple different occasions. And I think about how that alters my sense of time. And changes my past and changes my anticipated future because of what the two of you each are doing with me in that moment.
Yeah, there's a power, yeah, in having somebody else remind us. And then the other thing that came to mind was, as you both know, I'm working on a project called Bottom Left Drawer. So in a nutshell, it's getting your affairs in order so you're good to go. And I'm reading this, yes, and I'm reading this book called In Case You Get Hit by a Bus. And I love the work of taking inventory of my relationships and where I am in certain things and how do I want to, you know, say the things you want to say, do the things you want to do. But that as I work on it, it immediately puts me in the past or the future. And anxiety is right there. It's like, you don't even have to work at it. I don't even have to work at it. The anxiety is right there. But then it's noticing the beauty of it, of that it can hold, what it can hold, to look back.
Yeah.
And to look forward.
Yeah. It's funny. I think about, you know, when Phyllis and I, there's a little side story. Phyllis and I were in Rome, the one time we'd been there, and we're at St. Peter's, and we approached the Pietà, and, you know, I'd heard about it, had read about it, but I'm like, it's just amazing, right? And we're getting closer, and we're walking up to it, and there, in Rome, in St. Peter's, before the Pietà, stands one of my patients and her husband.
No. Get out.
I mean, it's one thing to run into your patients in the grocery store. And like, you know, so they were on a private tour. So it was the two of them and a guide. And so they weren't going to be, you know, going anywhere. And it's Phyllis and me. And we were fine. We like in our but like we were fine, but like fine as only one could be when you run into your patient in Rome in St. Peter's in front of the Pietà. Transition, right? Exactly. Talk about the state domain of the mind. Not what I was expecting. So once we kind of like passed through that transition period, I just remember, like, it's virtually impossible to take in. I mean, you feel like I felt. Have the two of you seen it?
No.
I mean, I like, you feel like the 6,700 pounds of it is just now, it's about to, it's sitting on top of you. Like you, and so like you're overwhelmed by the beauty of it in the moment. Like you can't, if you're actually gonna let yourself pay attention, it's really difficult to be in the past or the present or the future, right? Because like you're there. The challenge is, as soon as I walk away from it, I easily forget it. Like my old brain floods back in. And so the challenge is for me to remember it, is to remember it. I am practicing, I'm journaling about, I'm going over and over those 3 minutes sitting in the office with Courtney, with her voice and her tone and her look and her words. I'm practicing this because those words and voice and the Pietà speaks to something that already has a lot of neural payload, like practiced in, right? The tendency to rush to the past and regret, or to anticipate the future with anxiety, is a well-traveled road for me. And this road of paying attention to like her voice, her look, or the look of the two of you, or the pietà, like I don't, we have glances of this.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a lot of practice gazing at this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just, I need to have more moments like it. I then have to take those in and practice, practice them.
Mm-hmm.
I just think, Peppa, those, I still, I will forever. And that's a long time because that includes heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Want to hear and have you tell the story of the play, and you're the grocery store delivery boy and so forth, like, and how much time you had to spend becoming this in your mind, right? So much so that like you became this, even to the point where somebody like the director notices it, like it's in the air.
Yeah. It's certainly a time where you have to be in the present.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that work and be anywhere else.
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, something I certainly have. So often I wake up and one of the first thoughts in my mind is something that yesterday that I did that was stupid, or I'll tell you. Yesterday I had a meeting, a Zoom meeting with two people I've never met before. It was a business meeting, and so just prior to the meeting, I had like 5 minutes. I know we're not supposed to take 5 minutes to eat, but I had 5 minutes to eat. So I went and made myself a wrap, and I like to put fresh spinach in my wrap. So I eat this thing. You know where this is going.
No.
So I get done with the call and I go, and I look in the mirror and I have got this gigantic, I look like Michael Strahan. I look like I had a big gap between my teeth. I have this big giant green. Well, they don't know me. They've never met me. And so I'm talking to this whole thing and I'm smiling and, and I woke up the next morning. I'm like, oh, you idiot. I mean, like that's just a little thing, but so.
Yeah. You wake up and you think,
you're not
you
regret
with thoughts of, things to celebrate.
What a great interview that was.
Yeah, I killed it.
I love
I had a little spinach salad.
It went really well. Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. They were so lucky to talk to me.
Yeah. They knew I was from Kentucky. They probably just figured,
Yeah.
You know why the toothbrush was invented in Kentucky? Because if it was invented anywhere else, it would be a teeth brush. I'm from Kentucky, so I can say that, just to clarify.
That's such a good place to end. I mean, yes.
Okay. We have things to do.
Yes, we do.
This podcast is produced by Curt Thompson, Pepper Sweeney, and myself, Amy Chella. Audio production and music is by Keaton Simons. If you'd like to connect with us, you can visit us on our website, beingknownpodcast.com, or you can find us on social media at beingknownpod. Be well, be known.